One afternoon, the dad decided to take a walk with the child. The weather was mild, the streets quiet. They walked slowly, hand in hand, exploring the neighborhood together. The child pointed out small details: a bird on a fence, a flower growing near the sidewalk, a cat resting in a doorway. Each observation was met with a smile and gentle encouragement from the dad. He realized that life was filled with small wonders, often unnoticed until shared with someone else. During the walk, they encountered a small park. The child's eyes lit up. They ran toward the swings, laughing with a sound that filled the air with warmth. The dad pushed the swing gently, feeling the joy radiating from them. For a brief moment, he forgot about bills, work, and the uncertainty of the future. In that laughter, in that fleeting sense of freedom, he found something precious: the ability to be present, to experience life fully alongside another person. Returning home, the child was tired but content. They helped set the table for dinner, and the dad cooked a simple meal. They ate together, sharing stories of the day. The child talked about the park, the swings, and the small adventures they had noticed along the way. The dad listened, asking questions and laughing softly when they described the antics of the neighborhood cat. There was a rhythm forming, a sense of normalcy in the midst of upheaval. That night, as the child settled into their makeshift bed on the couch, they whispered, "I like it here." The dad's heart ached with a mixture of relief and love. "I'm glad," he said softly. "We'll make it better every day." It was a simple promise, but it carried weight. He understood that this was only the beginning, that many challenges lay ahead. He was determined to meet them. The next few days brought small but meaningful milestones. The child learned to trust him more fully, sharing little secrets and small joys. They laughed together, played simple games, and even began to help with chores. Each moment strengthened their bond, weaving a fragile yet resilient tapestry of connection and care. One afternoon, the child hesitated before speaking. "Do you think we could get a small plant?" they asked quietly. The dad smiled, seeing the opportunity to nurture not only a living thing, but also a symbol of hope. "Yes," he said. "We'll pick one tomorrow." The child's eyes sparkled with anticipation. It was a small dream, yet it carried significance. It represented stability, growth, and the possibility of creating a home together. Even as the bond deepened, reality lurked in the background. The dad knew he couldn't ignore questions from neighbors. The possibility of social services or the challenges of long-term care. He began thinking seriously about the legal and practical aspects of caring for a child not his own. Yet, despite the uncertainty, he felt ready to face whatever came. Guided by the connection he had formed, evenings were spent in quiet reflection. The child often fell asleep with a book in hand, exhausted from the day's exploration and play. The dad would sit nearby, thinking about their journey, the fragility of their trust, and the strength that grew in each small moment. He realized that love and care were not always loud or dramatic. They were often quiet, persistent, and consistent. As the days turned into a week, the apartment began to feel more alive. Laughter echoed in corners that had been silent for years. Simple meals became shared rituals. Walks in the neighborhood became adventures. The small routines of life were transformed by the presence of someone who needed him, and someone whose presence nourished him in return. Through these moments, the dad learned patience, resilience, and the depth of his capacity for care. He discovered joy in small achievements, hope in quiet trust, and a sense of purpose that transcended his previous understanding of life. The child, in turn, learned that the world could be kind, that someone could care for them without judgment, and that even in uncertainty, safety and warmth were possible. By the end of the week, the bond between them was undeniable. It was not perfect, and there were challenges still to face, but the foundation had been laid. Trust had begun to grow. Love, fragile yet undeniable, was forming. The single dad had begun to see life differently, not as a series of responsibilities to endure, but as a journey shared with someone whose presence made every hardship meaningful. He knew the road ahead would not be easy. There would be questions to answer, obstacles to overcome, and fears to face. Yet for the first time in a long time, he felt ready. the child's small hand in his, the spark of trust and hope in their eyes. And the quiet moments of shared life had awakened something deep within him, a readiness to embrace change, to face uncertainty, and to love without reservation. That night, as the child slept peacefully, the dad sat in the living room, looking at the notebook filled with drawings, the small plants on the windowsill, and the quiet, warm apartment that had begun to feel like a home. He knew this was only the beginning, but he felt a profound sense of purpose. Life had brought them together in an unexpected way, and together, they were beginning to create something beautiful, a fragile, hopeful family. Days turned into weeks, and the single dad began to settle into a rhythm with the child. They shared mornings, meals, walks, and quiet evenings together. But with stability came the inevitable reality that their situation could not remain unexamined forever. The dad had been trying to ignore the looming questions, hoping that the comfort and routine they were building would protect them. He soon realized that life rarely allowed such luxury. One afternoon, while he was at work, a knock came at the door. The neighbor, who had noticed the child on the steps days earlier, appeared concerned. She asked carefully about the child, mentioning that someone should know if a minor was living there. The dad felt a chill run down his spine. He had been hoping to shield the child from attention. But now the world outside, her apartment, was beginning to notice. He thanked the neighbor and reassured her that everything was fine. But her worried glance made him uneasy. Once she left, he sat down, running his hands over his face. The weight of responsibility pressed on him like never before. He knew it wasn't enough to feed and shelter the child. There were legal and practical matters that he had to address, whether he was ready or not. That evening, when the child came home from their small neighborhood adventure, he sat them down gently. "I need to tell you something," he said softly. The child's eyes grew wide, sensing the seriousness in his tone. "Sometimes, when someone takes care of you, there are rules from the city or the people who make sure kids are safe. It doesn't mean they will take you away. It just means we have to be honest about where you are so no one gets worried." The child nodded slowly, though uncertainty lingered in their gaze. It was the first real acknowledgement of the challenges ahead. The dad realized that building trust was not just about comfort and care, but also about preparing them for a world that could be unkind or complicated. He had to be honest, even if it frightened both of them. Over the next few days, began researching ways to ensure the child's safety legally. He called local services and asked questions about fostering, guardianship, and temporary care. Each phone call brought new information, sometimes confusing, sometimes reassuring. He realized that to protect the child and themselves, he needed guidance and support. During this time, the child sensed his worry. They would peek at him during meals, sometimes touching his arm gently, or offering a small smile that spoke of trust and attachment. The dad took these moments as encouragement. Even in the face of uncertainty, their bond was growing stronger. One afternoon, as they walked through the neighborhood park, a social worker approached them. The dad's stomach tightened. He explained calmly that he was looking after the child temporarily and that he wanted to ensure their safety. The social worker listened, asked questions, and then offered advice and resources rather than judgment. It was a relief, though it also made clear that transparency and planning were essential. The child watched the interaction silently, sensing both the tension and the dad's calm determination. After the social worker left, they walked quietly back to the apartment. "Are they going to take me away?" the child asked softly. The dad shook his head. "No," he said gently. "I'm going to make sure you're safe, and we'll do this together. You won't be alone." That night they sat together on the couch, sharing a simple dinner. The child leaned against him, and he felt the weight of responsibility and love in equal measure. They were navigating uncharted territory, yet the presence of each other made the journey bearable. The dad knew that protecting the child meant more than food and shelter. It meant courage, patience, and determination. In the following days, the dad continued his research and phone calls, slowly piecing together a plan that would keep the child safe and secure. He found a local organization willing to guide him through temporary guardianship. There were forms to fill out, interviews to attend, and rules to follow. It was overwhelming, but he embraced it, knowing that this was the right path. The single dad woke up to the sound of his alarm, the same way he did every morning. The small apartment smelled faintly of last night's dinner and laundry detergent. He sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, rubbing his eyes, and thought about the long day ahead. Work, bills, chores, life seemed like an endless loop that never changed. He had grown used to it, but deep down felt the weight of solitude pressing on his chest. He got up, stretched, and went to the kitchen. The fridge was nearly empty, just a few eggs, some bread, and a small carton of milk. He poured himself a glass, thinking about how careful he had to be with money. Every purchase had to be planned. No extra treats, no unnecessary expenses. Life had a way of teaching lessons the hard way, and he had learned them all. The morning routine was mechanical. He made a simple breakfast, cleaned the dishes quickly, and got dressed for his first job of the day. He worked at a small repair shop, fixing things that people had long given up on. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. After that, he had a second job delivering parcels. Exhausting, but necessary. On the way out, he glanced around his apartment, noticing the quiet emptiness. There were no pictures on the walls, no toys scattered around, no laughter echoing from another room. It had been years since he had shared his life with anyone, and the silence had become a constant companion. Yet, he had accepted it. He told himself that he had freedom, that no one depended on him, and that it was easier this way. The streets were busy as he walked to work. People hurried past, faces buried in their phones or lost in their own thoughts. He nodded politely to the neighbors sweeping his doorstep, exchanged a brief smile with the barista, and continued on his way. Life moved fast, and he felt like he was always running just to keep up. At the repair shop, the day passed slowly. Customers came and went, each with their own complaints and requests. He listened, fixed what he could, and tried not to get frustrated when things didn't go as planned. By the time the clock struck noon, he was ready for a short break, just long enough to eat a sandwich he had packed at home. During lunch, he sat outside the shop, enjoying the rare warmth of the sun on his face. He watched children playing in the distance, laughing and running without a care in the world. For a moment, he felt a pang of longing. He had never had children, never experienced the chaos and joy they brought. He pushed the thought away quickly, telling himself he wasn't ready and that his life was fine as it was. After work, he went to his second job. The streets were quieter now, the air cooler. He climbed into his delivery van, organized the parcels, and started making his rounds. Each stop was brief, each interaction polite but distant. He smiled, nodded, handed over packages, and moved on. It was tiring, but he had developed a rhythm that kept him going. Evening arrived, and he finally returned home. The apartment felt the same, silent, lonely, unchanging. He cooked a small dinner, ate slowly, and washed the dishes. He sat on the couch afterward, staring at the wall, feeling the familiar ache of isolation. The days were long, the nights longer. He wondered if this was all there was to life, if he would always be alone, if he would always wake up to the same routine as he prepared for bed. He heard a faint sound outside, a soft cry that seemed out of place in the quiet street. He paused, listening carefully. The sound came again, low and hesitant, almost like someone unsure if they should be heard. He frowned, concerned. He didn't usually notice things like that. He was used to tuning the world out, focusing only on what he needed to survive. Curiosity got the better of him. He put on a jacket and stepped outside, following the sound. The street was dimly lit by the yellow glow of street lamps. The cry came from the steps of his building. There, huddled against the wall, was a small child. Their clothes were worn and dirty, their hair tangled, and their eyes wide with fear and uncertainty. The dad's heart skipped a beat. He wasn't used to seeing children alone, especially at night. He knelt down slowly, not wanting to scare them. "Hey there," he said softly. "Are you okay?" The child shook their head, sniffled, and whispered, "I'm hungry." His mind raced. What should he do? He didn't know this child, didn't know their story, didn't know if it was safe to help. But he couldn't just leave them there, shivering in the cold. Compassion overrode caution. "Come inside," he said gently. "I'll get you something to eat." The child hesitated, but eventually followed him up the steps. Inside the apartment, the warmth and light seemed to comfort them. The dad led them to the kitchen, opened the fridge, and saw just enough to make a simple meal. He scrambled some eggs, toasted the bread, and poured a glass of milk. The child sat quietly, watching him, his eyes still wary, but trusting enough to wait. As they ate, the dad learned a little about them. They didn't speak much, only giving short answers when asked. They had been alone for days, surviving on scraps, and didn't know where to go. The dad felt a deep ache in his chest. Life had thrown a challenge at him he had never anticipated, a responsibility he had never imagined. And yet, he felt a strange warmth, a sense of purpose that had been missing for years. After dinner, he gave the child a warm blanket and let them sit on the couch. He thought about calling someone, the authorities, or a friend, but hesitated. He didn't know what would happen, didn't want to make things worse. For the first time in a long time, he felt truly present, truly needed, and strangely hopeful. The child eventually fell asleep, curled up on the couch with the blanket wrapped around them. The dad sat nearby, watching, thinking about how a single, unexpected moment had changed the course of his day and, perhaps, his life. He realized that life was unpredictable, that sometimes the hardest days could bring the most unexpected joys. As he prepared for bed himself, he couldn't stop thinking about the child. Who were they? Where did they come from? How had they ended up on his steps that rainy evening? Questions swirled in his mind, but one thing was certain. He couldn't ignore this. He couldn't go back to the quiet, lonely life he had before. Something had shifted, something had begun. He lay down, exhausted but restless. Sleep came slowly, his mind filled with possibilities and fears, with hopes and doubts. Tomorrow would bring challenges: how to care for the child, how to manage work, how to navigate the unknown. But he felt a determination he hadn't felt in years. He would face it, step by step, just as he had faced every other challenge in life. Outside, the city slept, unaware of the small miracle unfolding in the modest apartment. Inside, a single dad and a hungry child had begun a journey neither had expected. The quiet apartment, once a symbol of loneliness, now held the promise of connection, of trust, of family. And though neither of them knew what the future held, for the first time in a long time, both felt a glimmer of hope. The next morning, the single dad woke before sunrise. The apartment was quiet, but this time the quiet felt different. It was not just silence. It was filled with the presence of the small child asleep on the couch, wrapped in a blanket. He watched them for a moment, noticing the way they clutched the blanket tightly as if it was a lifeline. There was a fragility about them, but also a quiet strength. He felt a strange mixture of fear and hope. He went to the kitchen and started preparing breakfast. He only had a few eggs left and some bread, but it would be enough for the morning. As he worked, he thought about what to do next. Could he leave the child alone while he went to work? Would it be safe? Should he call someone? Every option seemed risky, but he knew he had to act carefully. Whatever he decided, it had to be right for the child. He called softly to wake them up. "Time for breakfast," he said gently. The child stirred, blinking at the sunlight streaming through the window. They looked hungry, their small stomach grumbling audibly. He set a plate in front of them. They ate quietly, almost as if they were afraid the food would disappear. He sat across from them, unsure what to say. Words felt inadequate. After breakfast, the dad asked cautiously, "Do you have anyone we can call? A relative? A friend?" The child shook their head, eyes downcast. "No one," they whispered. The words hit him harder than he expected. The reality of their loneliness was overwhelming. They were alone, completely alone, and now dependent on a man who had never planned to be a parent. He tried to smile reassuringly. "Okay," he said. "We'll figure this out together. Just for today, all right?" The child nodded, and for the first time, there was a flicker of relief on their face. They packed their small bag tighter and followed him as he got ready for work. He dressed quickly and prepared for his first job. The thought of leaving the child alone made him anxious. He had never taken care of anyone like this before. He packed an extra sandwich and a bottle of water, just in case. He sat the child down in the living room with a book and a glass of milk. "Stay here, read a little, and I'll be back as soon as I can," he said. The child nodded quietly, trusting him more than he thought they would. The workday was longer than usual. Every few hours, his mind wandered back to the child. Was the child eating properly? Were they comfortable? Were they scared? He found himself rushing through tasks, eager to return home, and yet maintaining focus to ensure he didn't make mistakes that could cost him his job. When he finally returned, the child was still on the couch, eyes wide as they spotted him entering the door. There was relief, even excitement, in that small smile. He felt warmth spread through him. Despite the chaos, despite the fear and uncertainty, this small connection brought a sense of purpose he had not known for years. He knelt down to their level and asked, "How was your day? Did you eat?" The child nodded. "I read some," they said softly, "and I had a little snack." That was enough to ease his worry slightly. They had managed, but he knew this was just the beginning of a complicated journey. The evening was quiet, but different. The child seemed more relaxed now, curious about the apartment and what it had to offer. They explored slowly, touching the worn furniture, peeking into cupboards, and asking small, careful questions. The dad answered as best as he could, careful not to overwhelm them with too much information. Dinner was another challenge. He managed to make a simple pasta with the few ingredients left in the kitchen. The child ate slowly, but with more ease than yesterday. They even asked for a second helping, and the dad felt a small victory. It was a tiny step, but it felt monumental. He realized that even the simplest moments could carry deep significance for someone who had so little stability. After dinner, they sat together on the couch. The child, feeling more secure, began to talk a little more. They shared small details about their life before the friends they had briefly. The school they had attended, the little joys they once experienced. The dad listened, not interrupting, letting them speak freely. For the first time, the child's voice carried hope, not just survival. He realized how much responsibility had landed on his shoulders. It wasn't just about feeding and protecting them. It was about listening, supporting, creating a space where they could feel safe and valued. He felt a strange mix of exhaustion and fulfillment. The work he had done all his life seemed insignificant compared to this. This was real. This mattered. Night came, and the dad prepared a small space on the couch for the child to sleep. He found an extra blanket, fluffed the pillow, and watched them curl up again. Their breathing became steady, slow, and peaceful. He couldn't help but think about how a single decision letting them stay last night had completely changed his life. He sat in the living room, sipping a small cup of tea, reflecting on the day. There were so many questions without answers. How had the child ended up alone? Where were their parents or guardians? How long would they be together? And yet, for the first time, he felt that he had a purpose beyond himself, a reason to push through the exhaustion. To keep going, no matter how difficult it became. The next morning brought the same routine, but with subtle changes. The child had grown slightly more confident, moving about with curiosity rather than fear. They asked about the small plants on the windowsill, about the worn pictures on the wall, and even about the street outside. The dad answered, keeping things simple, honest, and reassuring. He noticed small moments that made him smile. The way the child laughed quietly at a joke, the way they concentrated while coloring a picture, the way they reached out to touch his hand in a gesture of trust. These moments were rare treasures, fragile yet powerful. They reminded him why he had to keep going, why he had to be patient, why he had to care as the day passed. He realized that their bond was slowly forming. It wasn't immediate, and it wasn't always smooth. There were moments of tension, small arguments over rules and space. It's moments when the child would withdraw and the dad would feel helpless. But each challenge, each small victory, was a step toward trust. In the evening, after a simple dinner, they went for a short walk. The streets were quiet, and the air smelled faintly of rain from earlier. The child held his hand tightly. walking carefully beside him. They didn't speak much, but the silence was comfortable. A shared understanding between two people learning to navigate a new reality together. Returning home, the child found a small notebook in the drawer. They began drawing quietly, and the dad watched them, feeling a quiet pride. The apartment, once empty and lifeless, was beginning to feel alive. It was no longer just a place to sleep and eat. It was a home filled with small acts of care and connection. Before bed, the child curled up on the couch again. The dad tucked the blanket around them and sat nearby. They didn't speak, but the presence was enough. He knew that tomorrow would bring more challenges, more questions, and more unknowns. But he also knew that together they could face it. That night, as he lay in his own bed, he felt a strange peace. Life had changed in the blink of an eye, but for the first time in years, he felt alive in a way he hadn't known. A small child, hungry and alone, entered his life and opened a door to something he had never dared to hope for: connection, love, and a sense of family. He drifted off to sleep, thinking of the possibilities, thinking of the trust forming between them, thinking of the long journey ahead. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he also knew it would be worth it. And for the first time, he welcomed the unknown with open arms, ready to face whatever came next. The following days passed with a mixture of routine and small surprises. The single dad had never imagined that his quiet life would change so quickly, yet the presence of the child brought an energy he hadn't felt in years. He found himself planning not only for his work but also for their meals, their comfort, and their small joys. Each morning he awoke to the child's soft breathing, to the quiet hope in their eyes, and it became a motivator stronger than anything he had known. At breakfast, they would sit together, sharing stories and simple conversations. The child had started opening up, talking about small memories from their past. Sometimes it was a fragment of a day at school, a fleeting friendship, or a moment of happiness they had cherished. Other times, it was silence, filled with the weight of loneliness and uncertainty. The dad learned to sit with both, offering gentle smiles and understanding nods. There was no rush, no pressure, just the presence of someone who cared. He noticed changes in himself too. Where once he had been solitary and guarded, he now felt a need to plan for another life. He thought about safety, comfort, and what it meant to be responsible for someone who depended entirely on him. Simple tasks like grocery shopping became acts of care. When he bought bread, he thought about whether the child liked it. When he picked up milk, he imagined the glass he would pour for them. Every action carried a new weight, but also a new purpose. After work one afternoon, the dad and child sat together in the living room. The child was drawing in the notebook they had found, lines and shapes forming a small, imperfect world on the page. The dad watched quietly, amazed at the concentration and care they poured into their work. He realized that this child, despite the hardships they had endured, still held a spark of innocence and creativity. It was fragile, but alive. "That's very good," he said softly, careful not to startle them. The child looked up, a small smile spreading across their face. "Thank you," they whispered. The dad felt a warmth that was new to him, a sense of pride he had never experienced. It wasn't about achievement or recognition. It was about being there, truly being present, and seeing someone grow because of it. Over the next few days, routine solidified. The child became more comfortable, exploring the apartment, asking small questions, and even laughing occasionally. They shared a few simple meals, watched the news together, sometimes just sat quietly, content in each other's company. The dad found himself enjoying these moments, though he was acutely aware of the challenges ahead. One evening, the child hesitated as they reached for a glass of water. "Will you get mad if I make a mess?" they asked softly. The dad shook his head. "No, it's okay. We'll clean it up together." Their relief was palpable. It was a small moment, but it marked a step toward trust and comfort. The dad realized that these small interactions were shaping their bond more than grand gestures ever could. However, not everything was easy. There were moments of tension and conflict. The child sometimes acted out, pushing boundaries in ways that tested his patience. There were days when they refused to eat or when tears came without reason. The dad learned to navigate these moments with care, understanding that fear and past pain often manifested in difficult behavior. He responded with calm, firm guidance, always emphasizing safety and love over punishment. At work, his thoughts were never far from the child. He found himself daydreaming about their day together, wondering if they were safe, if they had eaten, if they felt secure. The jobs he did had always required skill and focus, but now they seemed almost secondary to the responsibility he felt at home. Yet the awareness of this responsibility did not burden him. It energized him, giving him purpose beyond routine survival. Meanwhile, life at home continued with its small joys and challenges. The child had started helping with chores, sometimes folding laundry or sweeping the floor. They drew pictures to decorate the walls, planted a small sprout in a pot, and even attempted to help with dinner prep. The dad encouraged each effort, praising them gently and helping them feel capable. It was a gradual process, but it fostered a sense of belonging and responsibility. One evening, while reading together, the child paused and asked, "Do you think we can stay together forever?" The dad's heart ached with both love and the weight of truth. "I don't know what the future holds," he said softly, "but I promise I will do everything I can to make sure you are safe and cared for. We'll face it together." The child leaned against him, comforted by his words. That night, sleep came easier for both of them. They were learning to navigate not just the physical challenges of life, but the emotional and legal complexities as well. And though the world outside loomed with questions and uncertainty, the apartment felt increasingly like a safe harbor, a place where trust and care were tangible. As the days passed, the dad began planning small routines to strengthen their life together. They established a schedule for meals, bedtime, and activities. They created small projects like growing plants, drawing pictures, or baking simple treats that gave the child a sense of stability and accomplishment. Each success, no matter how minor, was celebrated, reinforcing trust and confidence. The dad also found support from unexpected places. A coworker offered advice on juggling responsibilities. A neighbor dropped by with small supplies and encouragement. Even the child's quiet smiles and efforts were a form of support, reminding him why he continued, despite exhaustion and uncertainty. Together, they began forming a small community of care. Yet, challenges persisted. There were moments when the child would become anxious or withdrawn, especially when reminded of the outside world. The dad learned to recognize these cues, offering reassurance and gentle guidance. Patience became his constant companion, along with the realization that growth and healing required time, not just intention. One afternoon, while sorting through some old boxes, the dad found a photo of a child he vaguely remembered from years ago. It made him think about how life had a way of repeating moments, of giving second chances. He shared the memory with the child, who listened intently, absorbing not just the story, but the message of resilience and hope. It was a small but meaningful moment of connection, reinforcing the idea that life could be both challenging and beautiful. Evenings were quiet, but they carried a sense of accomplishment and peace. The child would curl up under a blanket, sometimes talking softly about their day, sometimes falling asleep in silence. The dad would sit nearby, reflecting on the journey, acknowledging both the difficulties and the triumphs. Each day brought new lessons, new challenges, and new victories, no matter how small. The apartment, once a place of loneliness, it transformed into a home filled with presence, laughter, and care. Though the path ahead remained uncertain, the dad felt equipped to navigate it. He understood that love and responsibility were intertwined, that protecting and nurturing someone required courage, patience, and unwavering commitment. By the end of this period, the dad and child had grown stronger together. They had faced questions, external scrutiny, and internal fears. They had navigated the unknown and emerged with a bond that was resilient and deep. The dad realized that their journey was just beginning, but he was confident that together they could overcome whatever challenges lay ahead. They had discovered not just companionship, but the profound impact of trust, care, and shared life. That night, As the child slept peacefully under the warm blanket, the dad sat nearby. Thinking about all they had faced and all that was to come, he understood that life would continue to test them, but he also knew that the foundation they had built, trust, love, patience, and courage would carry them through. And in that quiet, reflective moment, he felt a deep and unshakable certainty. No matter what happened, they would face it together, and together they would thrive.